The glass auditorium on the 35th floor of Alexicon Robotics headquarters was designed to exude an invisible authority. Mirror-polished black stone floors, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, and a cold white light that cast no shadows. Inside sat the full executive board, strategic advisors, and chief engineers from prestigious institutions, each dressed like a moving palette of silver gray. No individuality, no flair, and certainly no deviation in thought. At the center, standing on a steel-polished podium, was Grant Wexley, founder and soul of the corporation. His face sharp, his jaw square, his silver hair styled like a corporate signature. He was the kind of man who made business decisions sound like national weather declarations. Today was the unveiling of the AlexiBot Series 9, the newest generation of AI robots capable of real-time reflex-based obstacle response, a feat most competitors were still struggling to simulate in software. Just as Grant was mid-sentence, the doors at the back of the auditorium opened. A young man walked in, an old canvas backpack slung over his shoulders, a grease-stained equipment box in his left hand, and a faded delivery uniform jacket worn at the collar. No one turned. No one reacted. Because no one thought that man had anything to do with them. But Grant noticed. He paused, looked down from the stage, and smiled, half amused. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice warm and showmanlike, as if hosting a late-night talk show. "I know you're all eager to see our robot's autonomous obstacle demo, but before that, I'd like to conduct a special experiment." The room quieted. A few cameras clicked. Engineers in the front row exchanged curious glances. Grant raised his hand, pointing toward the young man who had just entered. The spotlight from above swung and dropped onto him. "This delivery worker standing here had something quite interesting to say during yesterday's equipment drop-off," Grant said, with a smile that carried just enough condescension. "He said, and I quote, 'I think I could write an algorithm that helps your robot avoid obstacles better.'" A ripple of laughter from the back rows. Grant kept smiling, but this time the smile wasn't kind. "So, today, we're giving him a chance. One computer, one unprogrammed robot, and 3 minutes." Flashes went off. A director of investor relations sighed, shaking his head with a chuckle. "This is some cheap PR stunt. Could be fun," someone beside him muttered. 3-minute comedy sketch." Kai Levington stepped up to the stage. His hands trembled. Not from fear, but from cold. The room was set to 64 degrees Fahrenheit. A clinical chill. Like the air in an operating room, he wasn't introduced. No one asked his name. There was no seat reserved for him. No sign he belonged in that room, legitimately or otherwise. Grant gestured to the control desk. "You may use your equipment. No one's stopping you. 3 minutes, starting now." Kai opened his backpack. Out came a mechanical keyboard missing 2 keys, a worn USB bridge adapter, and a scratched SSD. Some engineers smirked. A whisper floated from the second row. "That drive still works?" "Probably runs Ubuntu 2008. Poor robot." Kai said nothing. He plugged in the SSD and booted up the system via the command line. The monitor switched to terminal mode, a few eyebrows raised. One engineer typed a note into his tablet. "No, IDE, old school." 20 seconds in, no one cared. 40 seconds. Kai had declared all coordinates for the navigation system. 1 minute, the robot's eyes blinked. It began scanning its environment. And then, at the second 72, it moved. Not by default protocol, not a mechanical twitch, but a subtle tilt of the head, shifting slightly left. A movement that looked less like programming and more like thought. The room fell silent. If you've ever stood in a room where everyone looked through you, as if you didn't exist, then you know what Kai felt. If you've ever tried to prove your worth, only to be dismissed because you came from the wrong place, wore the wrong look, or lacked the right papers, then maybe you, too, have stood under a spotlight that felt colder than the rest of the room. No one is born to fit. But everyone has a moment, when the world is forced to see them. If you've lived through that moment, or if you're still waiting for it, don't let this story just pass you by. Leave your mark below the video. Someone like you might need to read it. And if you want to see more stories like this, you know where to stay connected. At second 130, one of Alexicon's most senior engineers, Dr. Marla Quinn, who earned her PhD from MIT at age 24, sat upright. Her face remained calm, but her fingers tapped lightly on the table in a steady rhythm. She wasn't the kind of person to be impressed by PR theatrics. By now, the robot had begun navigating a course of preset obstacles, wooden boxes, metal bars, and uneven debris. But instead of following the pre-written zigzag path, painstakingly coded over 6 months by Alexicon's programming team, the robot calculated the shortest route in real time, using floor stability and energy cost as live variables for pathing. That wasn't in the design. A technical director leaned over and whispered, "Did someone add adaptive environmental feedback to the nav logic?" "No," another replied. "That's still in internal simulation on the 12th floor servers." Grant froze. He didn't speak. His smile, the one that assumed he'd already won, was gone. In its place, widened eyes. By minute 3, the robot had finished its path. Its LED eyes shifted from blue to green, optimal operating state. Kai didn't look at the robot. He unplugged his keyboard, removed the SSD, and turned to face the entire room. His hands were still greasy. His clothes are still worn. His shoes were still scuffed, and his face had never appeared on any prestigious wall of fame. But at that moment, no one dared to see him as just a delivery guy. He didn't need to speak, but he did, because some truths need to be said out loud. I wrote that code 14 months ago. I sent it to Alexicon as an open suggestion, no compensation requested. The room held its breath. No one moved. Then a voice emerged from the third row. I remember that," said a younger engineer, hoarse. "I saw the submission. It was flagged unverified source, and discarded by—" He trailed off. His eyes flicked toward Marla Quinn. She didn't deny it. She stood and stepped up to the stage. She was slender, but her steps were measured, like everyone had been considered before she took it. "I signed off on the rejection," she said plainly. "The submission came from an account with no academic credentials, no institutional affiliation, no technical verification. Internal protocols required source validation. I had no choice." Kai looked at her. No anger, no challenge. Just one question. "Did you read the code?" Marla hesitated. A single beat. "No." Silence. Kai nodded. He didn't need to say anything else. But Grant Wexley, the man who had mocked him minutes ago, finally spoke. Perhaps this was an oversight in our intake process. However, there's no conclusive evidence your code formed the basis of today's demo. Kai didn't even look at him. He turned to the screen, navigated to a folder, opened a file labeled ELEXIMIRRORV 3.1. The screen displayed a full codebase, signed with Kai's ESHE256 hash, time-stamped more than a year ago. Then he loaded the robot's current demo code, developed by Alexicon's in-house engineers over the past 6 months. 100% identical logic, 89% identical line-for-line match. Marla stared at the numbers. She couldn't speak. In the quiet tension of the room, the soft tap of Marla Quinn's fingers on the table sounded like thunder. 1, 2, 3 taps. She drew a deep breath, scanning the room, as if asking herself how many here had known the truth, and said nothing. "I need to say something?" Her voice was dry, but it pulled the entire auditorium into breathless stillness. "Yes, I ignored Mr. Levington's submission. I didn't read it. I didn't validate it. Because our system is designed to eliminate anything that doesn't fit the mold." A few technical advisors shifted uncomfortably. A finance executive furrowed his brow, but no one objected. No one dared. "And yes, I know this code entered our official dev stream 6 months ago. I know where it came from." Kai said nothing. No thanks, no blame. He just waited. "But I wasn't the one who took it," Marla continued. She turned to Grant Wexley, her gaze sharp as a blade. "I was silenced when I noticed the similarity between the code in our prototype and the rejected submission. Grant approved its integration, then labeled it proprietary internal innovation. I objected." A murmur rippled through the room. Investors, who had come to see a tech demonstration, were now caught in the middle of an unfolding reckoning. Grant folded his arms. He neither confirmed nor denied it. "I must maximize shareholder returns," he said slowly. "We couldn't hold back the company's progress over a few lines of code from a no-name." Kai chuckled softly, for the first time that morning. "No name." He repeated the word, almost testing whether it still meant anything to him. "I was an honors student at Caltech," he said, calm, no pride, no begging. "I was referred to a special internship program here, but was rejected for lack of suitable background. Specifically, no parents in the industry, not from an investor family, and I had once requested tuition assistance." An older engineer buried his face in his hand. An HR director lowered her head. Kai scanned the room, not with resentment, but with a stillness more cutting than anger. "So I became a delivery worker. By day, I learned from what I carried. By night, I rewrote the code I was never allowed to submit. I didn't write for credit. I wrote because I believed these machines could do better, if given the right chance." Then he paused. "But you didn't want me. You just wanted my idea, without needing me to exist. If you've ever done the right thing and no one looked twice, if you've ever given something genuine and been treated like a nuisance for it, then maybe you understand that feeling. It isn't pain, it's emptiness. And sometimes all it takes is for someone, just one person, to speak aloud the thing you've been burying inside, to let you finally believe you're not crazy and you're not alone. If a part of you feels like Kai, don't hold the silence inside. Leave a single line beneath this video for someone like you to find." A deleted email doesn't mean it disappeared. Kai knew that, and so did Marla. For the past year, every night after his delivery shift, Kai had spent his final waking hour archiving every message, every reply, every auto-generated rejection, every push data handshake from his attempts to submit the algorithm to a lexicon. He didn't do it to sue, he didn't do it for revenge. He did it to stop doubting himself, to prove that what he had done had existed. Kai plugged his old SSD into the auxiliary projector. The auditorium was silent, like the calm before a storm. He opened a single folder. Why I Stayed Silent for a Year. All eyes turned to the screen. A string of emails appeared, sent from Kai's official address to a lexicon's public R&D inbox to R&D submission at alexicon.ai. Subject, patch for AI reflex navigation. Message, I don't hold an engineering degree, but I believe this code could help your robots avoid obstacles more effectively. Please consider it as an experimental suggestion. I'm not requesting credit, just please read it." Then came the auto-reply. "Thank you for your submission. Your proposal does not meet our preliminary evaluation criteria. No need to respond to this message." Another email, this one to a personal account of an Alexicon employee, is attached with technical notes. And then a returned file with a message from Alexicon's legal department. Received and placed into internal research stream. Not to be disclosed externally. Author not recorded due to unverifiable identity. Grant's voice, so commanding just minutes ago, was abruptly and completely irrelevant. The truth had stood up on its own. A middle-aged investor rose from her seat, her voice cold as a financial dashboard. "Grant, didn't you say the reflex system in the robot was entirely an internal product?" "It is internal," Grant replied. "We own the entire commercial implementation." "But it wasn't created from scratch by your team." "No," Marla interrupted. "It started right there." She pointed at Kai. The orderly narrative began to fracture. Someone from PR quietly pulled out their phone. Another engineer stood and quietly removed his security badge, leaving the room. Grant felt something intangible slipping through his fingers. Not power, but control over the space. Kai unplugged his SSD. No one stopped him. He looked across the auditorium, and for the first time, no one dared meet his eyes as if he didn't belong. "I don't need credit. I don't need to be hired. I don't need to be praised. I just want all of you to look straight at this. If code from someone like me could save an entire generation of robots from failure, how many others are being left outside this door just because they don't fit the profile?" His voice was steady, not angry, not trembling, just sharp, like a blade that had been quietly sharpened for a very long time. If you're thinking of someone right now, someone who was turned away just because they didn't come at the right time, from the right place, or if you were ever the one pushed aside in silence, you are not alone. You are not invisible. You don't have to explain everything. Just leave one small sign, so that someone else out there knows they're not the only one. Marla stepped off the stage and sat back in her seat, still tapping her fingers to the same quiet rhythm. She was no longer a chief engineer. She was now a witness. Grant remained standing, but his presence was no longer a symbol. It was a shadow, shrinking. Then, from the side of the room, someone else stepped forward. Elliot Drake, senior legal counsel of Alexicon. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "I am obligated to inform this assembly that, according to internal compliance policy, if a piece of code was used without legal attribution, all related commercial products must be suspended. Additionally, if there is evidence of fraud, the CEO may be requested to temporarily step down, pending investigation." A shiver ran through the rows, and for the first time, Grant Wexley lowered his head. Kai stood there, saying nothing more. He had said enough, not to prove himself, but to peel away a mask that had been worn for far too long. The hall now felt like a shipwreck, full of people waking up too late. Suddenly, Richard Wells, Senior Director of Human Resources, the very man who rejected Kai's internship application 3 years ago without even reading his request to reschedule, stood up and walked onto the stage. He extended his hand. "Kai," he said, "I think we misjudged you. Not just your code, but your ethics, your thinking, your vision." Kai didn't shake his hand. "Thank you," he replied calmly, "but I don't need recognition. I need you to change how you look at people like me." Wells slowly pulled his hand back, visibly awkward. "We're prepared to offer you a special position within the senior engineering team." full intellectual property rights. All records will be updated immediately. Your reputation, your history, will be fully restored." Kai looked down at the audience. He saw the faces of those who once ignored him. Those who wrote notes like, "Not a culture fit." Those who had looked at him through the tinted lens of pedigree and filters. "If I accept," Kai asked, "how many people will think I've been bought? And how many others like me will be silenced again? Because now you've got a token success story to parade around as proof of fairness." No one answered. If you've ever faced a moment like this, where accepting what should have already been yours comes with the price of staying silent, then you know that price isn't money, it's complicity. Grant Wexley, now stripped of the spotlight's power, stepped to center stage. He no longer sounded like a CEO, just a man, clinging to an image while the thing he built began to fracture. "You can leave," he said, "with full compensation. We'll sign an acknowledgement of your source code, no lawsuits, no disputes. You'll even be invited to speak at the next Global Engineering Summit." Kai chuckled softly. Not with contempt, just a hint of sorrow. "I didn't write that code to be on a stage," he said. "I wrote it so machines wouldn't crash into walls. And into people. Just like today." Grant swallowed hard. Kai turned toward Elliot Drake, the general counsel. "I don't need ownership of your robot," Kai said. "I need you to reopen your code review system. Let people without degrees submit ideas. I need you to remove those automatic filters that discard job applications because someone is too old, too young, or hasn't studied long enough. I need real people, evaluated by real work." A ripple of glances passed through the audience. Kai didn't wait for a response. "I didn't come to ask for anything. I came to return what you took, then leave." He turned his back, and as if a silent wind had blown through, every pair of eyes followed. No one tried to stop him. No one called security, no one dared speak. And if you're hearing these words and feel like no one ever gave you a chance, just because you don't look like success, then maybe it's time to know this. You don't need to be accepted to have value. Don't let the world measure you by its crooked rulers. You might be the one rewriting the rules. Kai stepped out of the hall. The light outside wasn't glorious. The sky was overcast. Autumn winds slicing through New York streets. A young PR intern ran after him. She gently tapped his shoulder. "Where are you going?" she asked. Kai looked toward the distance, where a delivery truck was parked across the street. "I've got one more delivery," he said. "In Brooklyn, a 7th grader. Her mom said she wants to build a robot from scrap parts." The girl looked stunned. "You're still doing deliveries?" "Yes," Kai nodded. "Not because I don't have other options, but because I've been rejected before. And I know this world doesn't need another person on a pedestal. It needs someone in the right place, at the right time, doing the right thing." He opened the truck door, climbed in, and started the engine. The old motor purred, steady and familiar. He drove away. No contract, no medals, no headline, only a system. Just beginning to question how it operates. No standing ovation. No press photos. No crowd chasing for selfies. Just one man, once silenced, choosing not to be silent anymore, and then walking on, quietly, without an audience. This is Kai Levington's story, but it might be yours too. The story doesn't end here, because somewhere out there, in some other cities, someone else is writing a line of code, not for fame, but to challenge the kind of system that once called them empty. 3 days after Kai walked out of the Alexicon Robotics Auditorium, a clip titled "Delivery Guy Codes Robot in 3 Minutes" passed 28 million views. No background music, no cutscenes, no brand logos, just one low-angle camera capturing the moment an entire room went still. The moment someone once deemed unqualified made a whole system fall silent. On Reddit, thousands of young engineers reposted the story of how Kai's code had gone unread. One post was titled, "I was rejected too, for not having enough credits. Thanks, Kai, for helping me believe I still matter." On YouTube, the comments stretched like a catalog of quiet pain never written into letters. "I used to write EV software. No degree, laughed out. Now I drive Uber, but today I'm reopening my laptop." Kai didn't just fix code, he fixed something in me. Lexicon Robotics was forced to hold a press conference. Grant Wexley didn't appear. Instead, Marla Quinn stood in his place, for the first time wearing soft gray instead of jet black. She spoke. "Our company is initiating a full restructuring of its recruitment and open innovation evaluation systems. We acknowledge ethical failure in how Kai Levington's proposal was handled, and we are publicly inviting him to advise a new campaign, opening doors for talent without credentials." A reporter asked, "Has he responded?" Marla shook her head. "He hasn't answered our emails. And he doesn't use social media." Kai doesn't need to speak, because he already did, by walking away. On the fifth afternoon after the Lexicon uproar, Kai parked his delivery truck in a quiet corner of South Brooklyn. He was delivering a box of electronic parts, ordered through a nonprofit education platform. The delivery label read, "Recipient Emily Tran, 13 years old." A small girl with glasses waited at the door, eyes wide with wonder. "Are you the guy from the video?" she asked. Kai just smiled. "Number that robot's the smart one." "Not true," Emily said, shaking her head. "I kept replaying the part where you said, 'Don't let them measure you with their rules.' I wrote it on my bedroom wall." She looked down shyly, then added, "I'm the only Asian kid at school not in the advanced math group. They said I didn't have the aptitude, but I rewrote the drone navigation script in Python." Kai looked up. He didn't say, "That's amazing." He just asked, "Do you still have that drone?" "Yeah." "Want to fix it so it flies around lampposts?" Emily nodded, and the two disappeared into the house. Kai didn't need a research center. He didn't need a TED stage or a CNN interview, a small room, a kid who believes in the future, a working line of code. That was enough. 1 week later, someone unexpectedly showed up at the post office where Kai worked. Dr. Wesley Kellen, head of the AI department at Caltech. The man who had once written Kai a recommendation letter to a lexicon and then said nothing when Kai was rejected. Wesley looked older now, more gray, but still bore the cold sharpness of academia. He walked up without a preamble. "I owe you an apology." Kai didn't react. Wesley continued. "Back then, a lexicon asked us to recommend only students with media-adaptable profiles, fluent speakers, stable family backgrounds, no history of financial aid requests." Kai gave a soft, not angry laugh. "You don't have to explain." Wesley looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not explaining to excuse anything. I'm saying this to ask you this. Would you return to Caltech, not as a student, but as a guest mentor for our AI and Ethics in Practice program?" Kai was silent for a moment. Then he asked, "Are you inviting me because I'm good? Or because I'm now famous?" Wesley answered plainly, "Because you were right, and because no one can teach ethical AI better than someone who's lived the consequences." Kai nodded. He didn't accept. He didn't decline. He just said, "If I come, I won't bring slides. I'll bring a robot that's learned to bow its head." There was no award, no neat conclusion, only a generation beginning to ask, If someone like Kai can reprogram a robot, what could I rewrite for myself? And somewhere, in a small room in Brooklyn, a 13-year-old girl tapped out lines of code and whispered under her breath, "Don't let them measure me with their rules."